Hey everyone, it's Coria Chavez, the recruitment specialist for Girl Scouts of Southwest Texas. Once again, welcoming you to another episode of our Girl Scout Virtual Book Club. Today we are going to be reading a very classic story. It was actually first published in the year 1941. So if you haven't heard about it before, ask your friends and family because I'm sure someone has. Now, the book we're reading is Curious George. So this story is about a little monkey right here. His name is George. And he kind of gets into some sticky situations, maybe some situations where he shouldn't really be in because he is so curious and wants to learn more. So we are going to read through the story. We are going to have a couple of discussion questions, and then I'm going to challenge you to your activity. Now, your activity today is going to be a little bit different from what we normally do. You're going to have to do some planning and have your family help you out. Okay? I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. It's a surprise. All right? So let's get started. This is George. He lived in Africa. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. One day, George saw a man. He had on a large yellow straw hat. The man saw George too. What a nice little monkey, he thought. I would like to take him home with me. He put his hat on the ground, and of course, George was curious. He came down from the tree to look at the large yellow hat. The hat had been on the man's head. George thought it would be nice to have it on his own head. He picked it up and put it on. The hat covered George's head. He couldn't see. The man picked him up quickly and popped him into a bag, and George was caught. The man with the big yellow hat put George into a little boat, and a sailor rowed them both across the water to a big ship. George was sad, but he was still a little curious. On the big ship, things began to happen. The man took off the bag. George sat on a little stool, and the man said, "George, I am going to take you to a big zoo in a big city. You will like it there. Now run along and play, but don't get into any trouble." George promised to be good, but it is easy for little monkeys to forget. On the deck, he found some seagulls. He wondered how they could fly. He was very curious. Finally, he had to try. It looked easy, but... Oh, what happened? First this, and then this. Where is George? The sailors looked and looked. At last they saw him, struggling in the water, and almost all tired out. "Man overboard!" the sailors cried, and they threw him a lifebelt. George caught it and held on. At last he was safe on board. After that, George was more careful to be a good monkey until, at last, the long trip was over. George said goodbye to the kind sailors, and he and the man with the yellow hat walked off the ship onto the shore and on into the city to the man's house. After a good meal and a good pipe, George felt very tired. He crawled into bed and fell asleep at once. The next morning, the man telephoned the zoo. George watched him. He was fascinated. Then the man went away. George was curious. He wanted to telephone too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What fun! Ding-a-ling-a-ling! George had telephoned the fire station. The fireman rushed to the telephone. "Hello, hello," they said, but there was no answer. Then they looked for the signal on the big map that showed where the telephone call had come from. They didn't know it was George. They thought it was a real fire. "Hurry, hurry, hurry!" The firemen jumped onto the fire engines and on the hook on the ladders. Ding dong, ding dong, everyone out of the way. Hurry, hurry, hurry! The firemen rushed into the house. They opened the door. No fire, only a naughty little monkey. "Oh, catch him," they cried. George tried to run away. He almost did, but he got caught in the telephone wire and a thin fireman caught one arm and a fat fireman caught the other. "You fooled the fire department," they said. "We will have to shut you up where you can't do any more harm." They took him away and shut him in a prison. George wanted to get out. He climbed up to the window to try the bars. Just then, the watchman came in. He got on the wooden bed to catch George, but he was too big and heavy, and the bed tipped up. The watchman fell over, and, quick as lightning, George ran out through the open door. He hurried through the building and out onto the roof, and then he was lucky to be a monkey. Out he walked onto the telephone wires, quickly and quietly over the guard's head. George walked away. He was free. Down in the street outside the prison wall stood a balloon man. A little girl bought a balloon for her brother. George watched. He was curious again. He felt he must have a bright red balloon. He reached over and tried to help himself. But instead of one balloon, the whole bunch broke loose. In an instant, the wind whisked them all away, and with them went George, holding tight with both hands. Up, up he sailed, higher and higher. The houses looked like toy houses, and the people like dolls. George was frightened. He held on very tight. At first, the wind blew into great gusts. Then it quieted. Finally, it stopped blowing altogether. George was very tired. Down, down he went. Bump onto the top of a traffic light. Everyone was surprised. The traffic got all mixed up. George didn't know what to do. And then he heard someone call, "George!" He looked down and saw his friend, the man with the big yellow hat. George was very happy. The man was happy too. George slid down the post and the man with the big yellow hat put him under his arm. Then he paid the balloon man for the balloons. And then George and the man climbed into the car and at last away they went. To the zoo. What a nice place for George to live. And that is the end of Curious George. So now we're going into our discussion questions for our book club. The first one, so as we've read through the story, we learned that George's curiosity leads him into some sticky situations. So can you think of a time where your curiosity may have led you into a little bit of trouble? I know I definitely have. So again, can you think of any time where your curiosity might have led you into a little bit of trouble. Question number 2, everyone has certain things that they're curious about. So what are you curious about? I'm curious about finding new books, and I'm curious about ancient mythologies and things like that. So what are you curious about? Don't forget, I need you to put your answers in the comments below and tell me your name and where you're from as well. Okay? Now we're getting into our activity, our challenge. So today's activity is actually, I'm really excited for. This is the first time that we've done it here for our book club. But we are going to actually have a cooking activity. So we are going to include the ingredients and instructions on how to make some banana Nutella rolls. I made them earlier today. They are delicious. So they are inspired by our character, Mr. Curious George. There's very little ingredients. You only need croissant rolls, Nutella, banana, sugar, and cinnamon. If you want to substitute anything, like maybe you're not a fan of Nutella, you want to use peanut butter or almond butter or anything like that, go for it. They're super easy to make. We're putting the instructions and the ingredients in our post, and we are actually going to include a cool time-lapse video of when I was cooking them. So get together with your family, make them. They're super, super good, very sweet, and I hope you guys have fun with them. It's a really good activity for all of you guys to do together as a family. So once you make your croissant rolls with your banana and Nutella or whatever ingredients that you guys choose, make sure to take a picture and put it in the comments below of you and your family enjoying your great Curious George inspired treat. All right. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of our Girl Scout Virtual Book Club. I am super excited to see all of your wonderful treats, and thank you so much. Bye.